Thank you so much for joining me. And I wanted to highlight, as I start, those people who have supported me when I'm doing some of these presentations, webinars, talking about complex topics. They're usually about an hour long, and people have registered and so on. And this last one that I've done here about COVID's hidden time bomb, rapid arterial aging, I need to make it probably sound more exciting because I don't think people realize just how important this is. So I had one of the unusual situations where I did this presentation and the whole thing is now ready. I mean, it's all been put together. It's all now ready as a course and it's available there in the description. It has 8 modules looking at a pulse wave velocity and the role of the vasovasorum in aging. So lots of information, but because I have to spend so much time going through all of this stuff, I then have moments of inspiration. And I had one this morning, which is why I'm talking about this again, because I've just did the presentation. Why am I talking about it? And it's because there is an idea that has been stuck in my head. And I'm talking about Takayasu arteriitis. It's a difficult word to get. Takayasu is Japanese, and it was largely because this was described initially in Japan. And there is a reason why I'm talking about it. Um, and it's due to the fact that as I did this research on what was happening in the aorta, the big blood vessel coming down from the heart, I realized that I think I found what could be one of the most critical and unexplained aspects about chronic COVID symptoms and people who don't have symptoms who are dying in unusual ways. These are probably related to some extent in relation to some of the sudden deaths going on. And it's difficult for me to explain just how important this is. So, the first thing is that this condition that I'm talking about, Takayasu's arteriitis, is a rare condition. And what I do when I'm doing the research is that I trust that there is really nothing new in medicine. And so if you're seeing it, it's pretty close to something else. And if you can find the something, sorry, this is what I was doing to be able to understand what was going on. And so here we have this condition, Takayasu's arteriitis. As we said, it's a large vessel vasculitis. Vasculitis just means inflammation of the blood vessels, usually under the age of 50 years old. And so you have inflammation in these arteries, particularly the aorta. That's the main artery taking blood from the heart. And so when you look at this here, and by the way, just so I get credit, this is from Vasculitis UK. And you can see here is the heart in the middle, and then you have the aorta doing an arch and then going down to be the abdominal aorta. And this arch of the aorta then sends off blood vessels towards the brain and the arms. And it's this part that is usually getting inflamed. And as I had been working through this, there's another condition called Kawasaki's disease that I was likening it to. But the more I thought about the research that I had been doing over the past few weeks, the more I thought, I think that this is more likely to fit the mold of Takayasu arteriitis. And essentially, we don't know the cause. It could be a consequence of environmental factors and genetic backgrounds. It can be precipitated by an infection. And this is where the COVID comes in. And it is quite rare world. My mic keeps on getting muted, and I don't know why. Anyway, I hope you can hear me. So it's a relatively rare disease, and it can affect both sexes, but mostly females. And this critically, it has a lot of symptoms, profound symptoms here: night sweats, weight loss, myalgia, painful joints, rash, and people get quite sick, dizziness, lightheadedness, shortness of breath, and all of these symptoms very much parallel what a lot of people are feeling at the moment. And the reason this is so important is that as I looked at the research talking about pulse wave velocity and the increased risk of high blood pressure after COVID and the correlation to spike protein, you notice I'm very careful. Whenever you hear me say COVID, I am talking about the infection, but I am also making reference to any source of spike protein. And what I believe is occurring here is that the immune system, specifically in these large vessels, has become primed by the spike protein. And then what happens is that on re exposure to the virus, you have ongoing inflammatory processes. And this is what I've always described as the COVID storm: highly vaccinated population, COVID reinfection, explosion. And this is where I am predicting this is occurring. And really, a big part of this came from a research paper, which again I discuss in the course. I'll just make reference to it here. But this paper was looking at the aortic inflammatory response in patients who had severe COVID-19. And the importance of that is that people will think, well, not as many people are having severe COVID now. It doesn't mean that the virus is not circulating very highly. And again, it's usually in highly vaccinated cohorts with IgG4, where they're having difficulty suppressing the viral circulation. And so, even though they don't have severe COVID, their immune system or their systemic system will be exposed to high levels of spike protein from infection. I'll keep emphasizing that in the unvaccinated cohort, their mucosal immunity significantly reduces the risk that the virus will get into the bloodstream. So, when we looked at this study here, what you can see looking at this is that there is inflammation around this aorta. And they found this consistently in most of the patients, and it resolved to a large extent within about 6 to 6 days. But here is what I realized is occurring. If you have immune priming in this region, every time there is a reinfection, this will become activated. And every time this gets activated, it does more damage to the lining of the blood vessel. And just so you understand what this would look like, I've got here an example of a large blood vessel. This is from the presentation. So this is just giving you an idea. And inflammation is in the outside part, just around it where these blood vessels are, what we call vasovassorum. And then that causes damage to the muscle layer and the elastic fibers, causing these arteries to get stiffer. And what I'm predicting is happening is that over time, infection after infection after infection, this is a death of 1,000 cuts. And I can't explain how significant this observation is. This piece of insight that I had was this morning in the bathroom, as it usually happens. It suddenly comes that, oh my goodness, I think this is it. This is why a lot of people are feeling sick. This is why we are not finding any specific pattern in terms of their illness, because you're doing all kinds of blood tests, nothing is showing up. But similar to what I said, this is the one of the best ways of diagnosing Takayasu's arteritis is a PET scan, positron emission tomography scan, and it then lights up the aorta where the inflammation, look carefully, the inflammation is in the outside of the artery. And that's where I'm saying this inflammatory process is. Um, as I said, you may not understand why this is so important now, but I will tell you that this piece of information is going to become the central target in terms of understanding what is going on with so many people. I was blown away when it came into my head. Essentially, so let me finally end with this point. How this works is that your immune system is normally kept in balance. You have immune cells that are effector cells. That means these are the guys who like to fight. You know, everything that goes on, they just jump into a fight. But you also have regulatory cells, and these are the peacemakers. That when these guys want to fight, they jump in and they go, relax, relax, take things down, don't go and hit the person. They would be like the calming influence of a woman in the pub when the partner is drunk and about to get into a fight. She would settle him down. That's the regulatory cells. Take him outside, get some fresh air, take him home so he doesn't do any damage. What then happens is that every time there is a COVID infection, because once the immune system is primed in these areas, the effector cells are ready to go. What then happens is that you have a COVID infection. The COVID infection exposes the system to more spike protein and it takes out the regulatory cells, at least for a period of time. And so, therefore, you end up with the effector cells without any balancing effect getting into fights. That's the inflammation that I'm talking about that will happen. And I will predict that for many people, not everybody, who keep on getting reinfected, every time if we did a PET scan, we would find some evidence of this inflammation. It would then settle down within a few months. They have another region is becoming more and more damaged. And this is why I'm saying if we don't understand the science now, by the time people realize it 10 years down the line, the no way to reverse it. And this is something that people will just have to accept the consequences of. Serious stuff ahead. So, as I mentioned, I want you all to think seriously, get ahead of the science. Take a look at this course here, uh, COVID's rapid arterial aging. Very, very important piece of information just for you to be able to get a better understanding as to the science as to why I'm predicting if we don't do anything, people are going to get very ill in the years to come. Sometimes it's difficult to know how long it takes, but believe me, this kind of inflammatory process, if you leave it alone, is going to cause huge damage. I don't mind being wrong, but sadly, over the past 5 years, I've largely been right. Have a good evening.